Welcome back to another episode of Views from the Hill. We as a team took a little break because of the great J term we had. We have a new guy hosting with us, Senior Jeff Utzinger. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here.
We still have Drew Ditto, and I think Jack Goheen's going to still appear. I personally really enjoyed the J term and the entire 2 weeks we had off. I did an internship with a buddy. What'd you guys do?
Yeah, I did an internship too with my dad.
Yeah, I also did an internship for a financial advisor, so that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, it was fun.
So this year we had this thing called J-term, which is basically every student besides freshmen got to choose like something they wanted to do, whether it be like an internship or like there was a class on cars. There were class years, and then you could do an internship too. So you choose one, and then for 2 weeks you got to do that and like learn more about something that you liked. So it's kind of cool because there's something that's not school, that's new. I think everybody liked.
Yeah, that is cool. Gosh, they didn't have that when I was here.
So we want to welcome a Cathedral grad of 2008, a popular voice in the indie sports world, and is a host of 107.5 The Fan. Welcome to the show, Kevin Bowen.
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me. I said on the way in, this is high tech right here. So, seriously, I appreciate. Always good to be back on the Hill, and I love the title, and I'm happy that you guys asked me to hop on with you.
Well, Kevin, how long do you think I've been trying to get you on the podcast?
Gosh, we have been going back and forth. It's been a couple months to say the least, and I know schedules have been busy, but like I said, I was here. I actually saw Jeff a few, I guess, months ago. Would it have been now? I don't know. Yeah, I came and spoke at Lori O'Brien, one of her classes. And I actually subbed here a few days, like early pandemic. We had a furlough where we only did 4 days at the radio station. And so I subbed a few times kind of in, I don't know if it's called this anymore, the Student Life Center. It's definitely not called the Student Life Center anymore. But I subbed in those classrooms over there, a couple Spanish classrooms. But thank you. And I'm glad it worked out, Seth.
Yeah, it's great to finally get you on the show. So hosting the morning show doesn't happen in one day. It's obviously something you have to work for. Did you know at a young age you wanted to get into sports radio?
Yeah, I've been a nerd and a loser about sports for quite some time. Basically, my early childhood was going downstairs every morning and reading the sports page with my dad. My dad taught at Ben Davis, so he left pretty early in the mornings. But I would go down, read the sports page with my dad. My mom taught in Carmel Clay schools, and I grew up in Carmel. So I'd go to school with my mom for elementary, and then I went to Clay Junior High in Carmel for junior high. So I've always had this just extreme passion for sports. Kind of a numbers guy as well. So like the box scores really fascinated me. I'd learn how to do math via like adding up, Reggie Miller did this in the box score and all of that. But then really at Clay and even at Cathedral a little bit, I mean, I wrote for the Megaphone, and I know I was driving in. I'm like, oh, wow, the Megaphone just won an award. I'm like, that's awesome. I'm thinking to myself, gosh, I was just happy if they published my 150-word, very mediocre piece back in the day. But really didn't get into it like as much as I should have at your guys' age. I mean, certainly like doing a podcast sounds like the most daunting thing in the world to, 17-year-old me. But went to Indiana University, wrote for the school paper, did some radio there, and that's kind of where it took off. But and this is probably the media world, I never would have thought 32-year-old Kevin Bowen would be hosting a radio show in Indianapolis. If you would have told me that at the time, that would sound awesome. But because I just have so much affinity for Cathedral, the city, growing up in this kind of sports community, if you will. But like how it's gone from newspaper to more of the audio form. Again, I never could have seen that, 15 years ago.
It's funny you mention, 15 years ago, you saying you never expected you to be where you were at our age. I know Seth is really big into this industry, and obviously we are all in this broadcasting class that gives us the ability to do this podcast and color commentating for the boys' basketball games. But I don't think broadcasting was an elective when you were here. Was there anything that you were interested in heading into college?
Boy, that's a good question. I'll be honest, my resume was pretty scarce in terms of like extracurriculars. I played golf for 4 years, but besides that, I did a very poor job of going out of my way to like seek out things. And like you mentioned color commentating, Jeff, for like the basketball team. Like again, 17-year-old me would probably been too scared to like even pursue that. It's like, this is like very intimidating. I mean, for those that like can't see us, like, we're talking into these like equipment things, and like I would have been scared, nervous, and like afraid of, oh boy, I don't want to screw up. But I think everyone, especially at this age, should realize that it's just a golden opportunity to screw up, to fail, to find things that you love, you want to get better at, all of that. Boy, I did Math League. Is Math League still a thing? Yeah. Okay. I love Math League. Again, I'm looking at these numbers on the board behind you. I feel like I'm in Rounders, the movie here, trying to figure out, count cards. But, man, again, outside of that, I don't, boy, I should probably look up my like high school resume when I go home. It wasn't the most impressive thing. And that was what was scary about, IU for me. And that was what was even scary, like my early professional years of like what you guys are doing now. Really, I got my feet wet at like 24 or 25 years old doing it. I remember going to the Colts and being like, hey, let's start a podcast. I'm thinking to myself, I don't even know what I'm doing. Did I mean to say that out loud? But like, I just felt like that's kind of where the media cycle was going and the media industry was going. And so, yeah, I really didn't have, I grew up in Carmel, and so like Carmel High School had Channel 21, which was, basically student-run television. And I mean, that was like a big deal. North Central, I know, has like a TV studio and things like that. And I know Cathedral's come a long way in the broadcast realm. There might have been some early stuff with that, but I feel like I graduated in 2008. I feel like probably in like the handful of years after I graduated is really where it picked up.
Yeah, so you did the megaphone when you were here.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of your first experience with sports writing?
Pretty much. I had a 7th grade teacher, Deb Davis, at Clay that I will never forget, just the impression she had on me of like, Kevin, you are obsessed with sports, and at the same time, you have some interest in writing. Can we combine those two? So she really was kind of the first spark in it. Lori O'Brien, who I talked about earlier, I would say continued that for me of like, you can pursue this like at a pretty substantial level. And Indiana had the right, major for me in sport communication print, and then just great opportunities from the Indiana Daily Student to WIUX, which is their student radio. I did a little bit of TV in college, but not a whole lot. So I would say like 8th grade, a little bit, and like junior high or high school, I probably had some clips, but again, nothing like, I mean, we're recording a 30-minute podcast. Yeah. Like, oh my gosh, no, that's like walking on the moon to 17-year-old me.
While you were writing in the megaphone, you probably wrote some pretty fun stories. Do you have like a favorite memory from Cathedral?
Just like overall favorite memory? Oh gosh, boy, we could go for 3 hours. Yeah, I mean, I definitely do. Winning state title in golf senior year tops everything. I'm very passionate about golf and super competitive in the sports world. Certainly not the most athletically gifted. Luckily, I can hit a golf ball a little bit. So winning that state title, we lost regionals to Avon that year, and to come back and beat them in the state finals was awesome. And so I vividly remember that. I remember being out on the football field the day of the state finals, and Coach O'Hara, the football coach at the time, was out there kind of giving us a little pump-up speech. We were actually hitting golf balls on the football field. We certainly shouldn't have done that, trying to hit it through the uprights, which was it's a great thing. I wouldn't advise any of you to do that, certainly not with any teachers around. But that was my greatest kind of, I guess, individual memory. And just in general, like, I didn't want to come to Cathedral. I was a Carmel public school kid, and I would venture to bet like 90% of I don't know, maybe I'm speaking more for like the public school kids that come to Cathedral, but like it just wasn't on my radar. Like I didn't grow up I grew up Catholic, but I didn't go to a Catholic grade school. So coming to like Cathedral freshman basketball camp, I'm like, gosh, everyone knows each other, and like I don't really know each other or know anybody. But my older brother went here. He was 5.5 years older than me. My mom went to Chittard, so she always wanted to have, I think, some Catholic education in our lives. But that first day, I'll never forget walking in, and Coach Kesterson was my modern tech teacher in first period. I'm just like, what am I doing? This is the last place I want to be. And just, for 1 to 2 weeks, 3 weeks, just thinking to myself, gosh, this is awful. And then something clicked, about September, October, freshman year, and it was a great decision, really, of my life. I think it set me up for everything. And I know that might sound a bit hyperbole, but I really believe that. I married a Chittard girl. I don't think if I go to Cathedral, like that connection would have happened. So many friends, personally, professionally, I think I've developed from my time in high school. And so just tons of memories, great sports memories as a fan. As a Carmel kid, we played Carmel, the first game of football every year. There's some interesting YouTube videos as me of a fan that I think are still lurking out there on the web. Pretty passionate about that. We had a fun time. We won state in football my junior year, lost a heartbreaker senior year, Jack Doyle catching a Hail Mary against Evansville Rights. I can still picture it to this day. Live, it looks like a touchdown, by the way, but it was actually the right call. He was out at the half-yard line. And then basketball, we had a lot of fun with that. I remember going to the wrestling state finals and baseball state finals. So, yeah, tons and tons of great memories, great friends. I had 6 people in my wedding. 3 were family members. There's Tyler McClure, by the way. That's a classmate of mine, class 2008. 6 people in my wedding, 3 family members, and 3 kids I went to high school with. And so I think those relationships and those friendships that I didn't even know, 14, 15-year-old me walking in here, but 18-year-old me walking away and continuing them through. We have a group text. They're texting me right now. We still have that to this day. So lots of awesome memories.
So you went to school with Jack Doyle. What's it like covering him now?
Yeah, it's funny you ask that. Jack and I were, I'd say, friends in high school. Yeah, we're not best friends, but definitely friends. Remember him going to Western Kentucky, and he actually roomed with one of my good buddies growing up from Carmel. He roomed with him at Western Kentucky initially, and then just watching his college career, and I'll never forget the day that the Titans cut him and the Colts claimed him, and the rest is history after that. Jack and I still text to this day. We don't have a super close relationship, and that's first off, I don't want to speak for Jack. I don't know if he wants a super close relationship, but I don't necessarily want to put him in that awkward situation. When you're in high school and college and you're doing media, it's probably a little bit different, and you're not going to be overly critical. But my job is to have journalistic integrity, if you will. And so unfortunately, if Jack drops a ball in a game, luckily he doesn't drop many balls, if any. But if he does, I gotta kind of call it like I see it. So. But no, Jack and I are still really, I'd say, cordial and friends to this day. Again, thankfully for my sake, he's had an unbelievable NFL career where there's been no need to, rip him or anything like that. And it's just an awesome story. It's an incredible story that I'm sure you guys know full well. And it's a bit Hollywood-like for an Indy native and everything. And he couldn't be more down to earth. And the East Side crew, the Holy Spirit East Side crew, is thick and through. I love those kids, getting to know them in high school and everything, and I know they still love watching Jack play to this day, and we'll see how much longer.
Yeah, my dad was a 3rd and 4th grade coach at Holy Spirit.
Oh, was he really?
Yeah, he coached Jack.
I love the Holy Spirit East Siders. I'm gonna try and get my wife to move to the East Side. I think
I always go to the festival that they have during the summer.
Yeah, great time there. Yeah, I love the Irvington vibe. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the East Side. Giacomo's Pizza, great spot.
Yeah, can't complain. As we move in towards kind of your career as being a Colts journalist for the Colts, I remember you mentioning when you had talked to us how cutthroat it can be, and how every day there's plenty of media people there, whether it's from ESPN or other huge news sources, and always needing to find something special to write about, but at the same time not go too far. And if you don't mind talking about how your career ended there, can you kind of explain that situation you were in and why you had to stop?
Yeah, so basically I was fired by the Colts in 2017. So working for a team has so many great perks. Got to travel the road games, got to go to London when they played in London. You're on the team plane. You're behind the scenes seeing stuff that, hell, I remember looking at Jack a few times being like, dude, can you believe that we're doing this? You're playing in the NFL. I'm not clearly playing in the NFL, but this is really cool. And him and I would be like, yeah, dude, I wore a Reggie Wayne jersey to homecoming week, back in high school. And here he is, my teammate for a couple of years. But, when you work for a team, and, you guys will find this out at some point, no matter what industry you choose. Jeff, you mentioned earlier you did some financial advising. If you were to write a press release for the financial advising firm or whatever, they're going to want to make it sound pretty good. Right. So when you work for Colts.com, they want you, to write in a positive light. And I guess, 22, 23-year-old me is just like, I'll take any job. And there are a lot of pros working for a sports organization. Again, you're in the inner workings of it. You can produce unique content. You can have behind-the-scenes access. We saw Hard Knocks this year. For the Colts, there is, you can have a Hard Knocks type of feel to, some of your work. But when it doesn't go well, I'd love to read the content on Colts.com after the final loss to Jacksonville. It probably looked a little different than what it looked like on the Indy Star and ESPN or our website or things like that. So it kind of hit me, like 4 or 5 years into it, the Colts, like, wow, I really have one hand tied behind my back and like what I can say, write, podcast, video, whatever. Now, I started the Colts. My first year out of college was the 2012 season. So that's Andrew Luck's first year. They go 11-5. They go 11-5 the next year. They go 11-5 the next year. And they progress in the playoffs each of those 3 years. So, again, to like the Jack Doyle point that Drew's asked me earlier, like, it's not like I was needed to be overly critical. Right. But then all of a sudden they go 8-8. And they go 8-8 again. And, like, the luck questions are there physically. And so, basically, you're kind of pulled in a lot of directions of what you can say, what you can write. And I'm pretty low in the totem pole. And I won't get too deep into it. But basically, I wrote some things that player agents had issues with. I laugh at the thought that a player agent would have an issue with that and that the team would look at the agent and say, you're right. He's in the wrong. He needs to go. Like, to me, I'm just kind of like, that seems stupid. But I'm 250th on the totem pole in terms of important people in that organization. So that's basically what happened. Luckily, I was hired very shortly thereafter by the radio station here in town, 107.5 The Fan at the time, 1070 The Fan. And I've been writing for their website, doing the podcast, Kevin's Corner, and then now hosting the radio show for about 5 or 6 months now. So that's kind of the Cliff Notes version of, again, tons of pros and cons working for a team, but from the like creative handcuffs, they're on you, right. Whereas now they aren't on me, which is a nice feeling. And I think more representative of, like, again, not to get too like in the weeds of like journalism and media, but you hear so many people nowadays are like, the media's biased, and like I try so freaking hard not to let any of that creep into my work, because like, Seth, I know like you've listened to the morning show and you've whatever sent me messages about it. Like, you're listening because you respect my opinion, or at least that's the hope that I have. And if I start all of a sudden being biased one way or the other, like, you might all of a sudden be like, this is dumb. Like, I want to listen to something else. So that's kind of where my mind eventually got to.
Yeah, I don't want to, like, speak for you, but I feel like growing up, if you're an indie sports fan, you feel better giving your own opinion rather than being filtered like you said you were.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to put it. And, like, don't get me wrong. I mean, I am, at points in my life, I was a diehard Pacers fan, diehard Colts fan. And for my job, I need them to be good. Like, I was born in 1989. It's looking like the Pacers are going to miss the playoffs this year. That'll be the first time in my lifetime, so your guys' lifetime, that the Pacers and Colts will have missed the playoffs in the same season. Like, that's kind of wild when you think about it. So we've had it pretty good. So yes, I want our city. I want like people to be excited. Like that's what you want, certainly. But at the same time, I can't lie. If I'm doing that, again, I don't think I'm fully doing my job. So that's just the constant battle that you fight with it. But I'm doing what I love, and that's, I think, what I keep on coming back to. My wife and I have talked about that a lot, of just like, I wake up every day and, I get to do what I love and get to come in here and do this with you guys, two of my loves, talking sports and talking Cathedral.
So when you're doing the morning show, do you have like a set of takes that you're going to do for a day, or do you guys kind of just like talk about what happened the day before?
Yeah, it's a great question. So like when I first got started in the business, I'm thinking to myself, oh, you script everything, right? I mean, you got to have everything scripted. Like I need to I need to read. And last night, Isaiah Jackson scored 26 points, and the Pacers beat that. Like, that's what I envision radio being. And now I've evolved to the point where it's like you go in there with some bullet points. And yeah, I mean, there are times where you're going to want to read a specific quote, or you're going to want to have some specific numbers in front of you. But what sounds the best and sounds the most conversational is when you do have the mix of some sort of scripted portion, but then there is some back and forth, like a natural sort of flow. Yeah. I mean, very similar to this. So I think that is something that I always fight, because I'm a big preparer. Like, I'm basically, how the show works for me is I prepare when the show ends, I prepare for like an hour for the next day. So the show's 7 to 10 a.m. So from like 10:30 to 11:30, I prepare. Then I prepare again at like 7 to 8 p.m. Typically, I'm watching a game during the winter, with so much basketball, college and professionally. And then I'll wake up at 5 a.m. and finish my prep for the show to start at 7. So, yeah, interview questions. I've got 10 or 15 questions, and I don't necessarily follow them like 1, 2, 3, 4. If, the interviewee is leading us down a different direction, I'm going to go down that. Yeah. So I definitely try to have bullet points, and I keep like a running long log of like interesting takes that I think are there, or facts, or tidbits that I just compile throughout the course of honestly years at this point, and I can always kind of reference that when we're bringing up a certain topic. And for the most part, when you're doing a show from 7 to 10 a.m., news isn't really breaking from 7 to 10 a.m. Today we had the Tom Brady retirement officially announced. We obviously knew that was kind of coming, but it's not like, if I did our noon to 3 show or a 3 to 6 show, that's more of a little bit kind of fly by the seat of your pants. Some news can break during the day. So for the most part, we know what's coming, and my host and I can prep a little bit.
Is it tough, having the show start at 7 a.m.? You got to get up early.
Yeah, tell me about
so you want to get sleep, but those games, like let's say Pacers played LA at home last night, but if they're playing in LA, do you have to stay up for that whole game?
So I want to, and I try to. Having a 19-month-old though, that kind of can differ a little bit. I didn't realize the basketball nights. I kind of forgot that, like, oh wow, the Pacers do play out west for like, and how many bleeping Big Ten games start at 9 o'clock? I'm like, can we get a few at 7 or 8 here? But whatever. Purdue's at Iowa. Here I am until 11:30, kind of battling it. So the nice thing about the show is from 7 to 10 is the only time I'm really obligated to be in the office. So I can come home and nap for an hour if I want to. I never believed in coffee until I started the show. I now believe in it. So I drink coffee to kind of keep me going as well. So yeah, there are times at night, but like I've got to also look at it, Seth, like my job is this. You're Seth and you're on a date with your girlfriend and you might have missed the Pacer game last night. Well, you're listening to us to find out about what you missed. So like it is my job, and it's a pretty good job to have in terms of like, here I am, and Jeff, sorry but I would not be a financial advisor. 1, I'm not smart enough. B, I think it's a bit boring. But you know what I'm getting at. Like, right. The boredom is not necessarily there for me on a day in, day out basis. So that, I think, helps some things. But the hours are weird. I was talking to my wife about this the other day. Like, I pick up my daughter at 4 o'clock from daycare every day. And that's the first human interaction I usually have since I've left the studio at 10. It's just kind of weird. Like, I come home, and my wife usually goes in the office. She likes to work from the office. And I just don't really see anybody for, like, 6 hours. So it is a weird flow. Now, when basketball season ends, this will be the first time I've ever done the show, like, again, the Pacers aren't going to make the playoffs. It's looking like, hopefully Purdue goes to the Final Four just from a topic standpoint. You get to early April, and it's kind of like, oh, boy, what are you talking about? May, June, July. So that's part of, to get back to your point, Drew, of like, I think it is a little bit more scripted of like, you do get into some bigger picture topics, or, what do you guys think about Carmel and Center Grove leaving the MIC or things like that? Or, just kind of like, different stuff that we maybe didn't hit on at the time, but now we have a little quiet time to hit on those a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned, how good you have it with your job and how much you love it and how easy it is to talk about sports. And I'm glad that, over the last like 20 minutes we've gone through almost your whole career of being at IU and then being a journalist for the Colts and now being co-host for the radio show. You're in your early 30s right now. Over the last, 12 years, you switched up quite a bit. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? What are you shooting for?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jeff. There's a balance of like, I'm very content. Is that the principal? President. What's his name again?
Rob Bridges.
Yes, I get his emails. Is that a Lions jersey he was rocking?
Yes. Yeah, he's a big Lion.
Wow, I love that. Gosh, I love that, man. We need Eminem to wear that during the halftime show for the Super Bowl coming up here. All right, Jeff. refresh me again. Sorry. Where do you see him? 10 years?
Yeah, 10 years.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a balance of like I'm extremely content of the position I'm in, but I don't for one day take it for granted. Like I'm going back to the earlier point about working for a team. When you work for a team, there's unbelievable security with working for a team. I think you guys are sports fans enough. You've seen it. Like there's budget cuts at ESPN. I mean, we look at ESPN as like the crystal ball, and it is, but like they have financial situations that are, the broadcast crew, I believe for the Indiana-Purdue game a couple weeks ago, wasn't even in the building. It's like you're seeing the media climate evolve. So I'd love to do this for the rest of my life, but I know that's probably not the reality of the business there. There's always been a little bit of a dream of like, you're doing some broadcasting. I've always thought about that. Like, would I ever get into play-by-play? Could I ever do it? Am I good at it? Am I bad at it? I broadcasted a couple IU games, basketball and baseball games back in the day, but that was it. That's always been intriguing to me. But if you're ever going to like go full bore into that or try to get a national, I'd have to move. And I mean, Emeritus St. Simon, Chittard girl, her 3 siblings are here. My one brother is here. I have a feeling that as long as they'll have me, I don't believe in superstitions, but I just knocked on wood. I would like to do this for a long until one of you 3 take it, I guess.
I guess it is, like, you got it as good as you do, talking about sports that you grew up rooting for.
Which I think is a good point you bring up because, like, Kevin, if you took Kevin Bowen and said, go do this in Cincinnati, I wouldn't be there. Like, I feel like growing up in it, I get it a little bit more, and I have an appreciation for it. And, like, the Colts are my strength, quote unquote, but like I love college basketball. I mean, I'm a Notre Dame basketball fan. Some people don't even know if those exist. Like, growing up here, I love the Indy 500 from afar. So like I have, I love high school sports. I know it means a whole lot. I mean, I follow you guys so much, and Cathedral Athletics I follow, a ton. Like I understand that as well, being that we do have 2 professional sports teams. Our college teams are, pretty well thought of. But the high school sports still matter as well. So I think being in this market, I do understand that. I think that helps me resonate with hopefully our listeners, because I am on like the younger side compared to, our other 3 hosts are 49, 50-something, and 50-something. So, I am young compared to our other hosts there. So I think that's something that I need to remind myself. And I do. Again, I'm not looking to get out of the market. And the other thing, too, is just the 2 negatives with the job is the time and financials. So, Jeff, financial advising, very, very, very smart. So, yes, from a financial standpoint, I mean, I make nice money. I'm very, like, I don't want to act like I'm, scratching and clawing here and was hoping you guys would invite me to lunch today or anything like that. But, there are certainly many friends of mine that are much well off in the financial world of their respective jobs. And then time, like, the Colts played on Christmas Day night this year. I was, kind of obligated for about 5 hours. Now, some might say that's great. You're watching a football game. That's really fun. But, when you do start a family, I mean, you do have to make sacrifices and have a support system around you that can help out in that area. So those are the 2 negatives. But as much as me waking up each day and doing what I love, I think that far outweighs the cons.
You've had the pleasure of interviewing a lot of cool people. Who do you think your favorite person you've ever interviewed is, and who do you think is a person you'd want to interview the most that you haven't?
Oh boy, Drew, that's good, really good. I have a crush on Tiger Woods, so I would say Tiger. I don't know if that's the most politically correct answer for me to say, but yeah, that's not great journalistic integrity, me saying I have a crush on an interview candidate. But yeah, I'm obsessed with Tiger. And so that would be the one. And boy, we could go a lot of different directions with that interview. Probably my pinch me interview moment was, gosh, now that I think about it, it was only about a handful of years ago. LeBron and Lance Stevenson get into it, shockingly.
Was that after he blew in his ear?
Yeah. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, obviously, you all remember that moment. And so, and I guess this is just something like more media industry job-wise. let's say there's 10 of my colleagues covering the game from a Pacers standpoint. There's 10 of us that are all thinking, okay, after the game, you go to the Pacers locker room, you go to the Pacers, podium access. You hear, I don't know who the coach was at the time, probably Nate McMillan or somebody. You hear McMillan talk, and then you go into the locker room. Yeah, maybe it was Vogel. I'm like, wait, I have this credential that gets me to go to the visiting locker room. Why don't I go in there and see if LeBron has anything to say about it? And then I'm like, oh, now just like instant sweat, is going down my body. I'm like, Jesus, well, at least I worked out today, or at least this will be my workout for the day. So I go in there, and LeBron, I've obviously heard LeBron in media sessions. I mean, he's a brilliant basketball mind, and handles the media, I think, in a perfect way. And almost kind of has them on strings of like, yeah, I'll go where I want to go. You're not going to bait me into anything. So I'm thinking to myself, well, I got to ask about Lance, I mean, he was the one, basically LeBron got teed up, and at that point of the game, I want to say the Pacers went on a 10-2, typical Lance, instigate it, and boom, all of a sudden, Banker's life, the roof blows off, and Pacers come back and win. So, something along those lines. So I finally get the courage to ask LeBron something to the effect, and it's on my Instagram now. It was, again, a handful of years ago. I kind of forget exactly what I phrased. I just remember being so nervous and just kind of blurting it out, and luckily LeBron gave a really good answer of back in school, they always catch the one that does it second. Something to that effect of the teacher says, don't be the one to get caught, or something along those lines, and I got caught or something like that. And Lance is just he's just a little whiny or something. He said something to that effect. So I'm like, wow, that's a great answer. I'm like, wow, that was LeBron, on the record, whatever. And I'm shaking my iPhone, shaking from filming it or whatever. So I go, out in the little area, and now I have content that my other 9 colleagues didn't get. They are all in the Pacers locker room, and so that was kind of a proud moment of just it's a unique way to come at it. I'm very nervous because I'm interviewing, arguably probably the most impressionable basketball player of my lifetime. I was still pretty young when Michael was in his prime. And then, sure enough, I think the Pacers and Cavs played, I want to say, in the playoffs that year. I think it was when the Cavs beat the Pacers in 7. And that's how ESPN led into the series. That LeBron interaction of, setting up the scene of it. I'm like, wow, that's really cool. ESPN their cameras are obviously there, and they've taken that question and answer. So, yeah, that probably would rank up there. I've been fortunate to interview Jim Irsay, the Colts owner, at some Super Bowl meetings and over in London, and that was really cool as well. So yeah,
Interviewing all these famous people, is it you're interviewing the top people from the Colts, Chris Ballard, Carson Wentz, Frank Reich? Is it intimidating at all?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, I'm a human being. I mean, if you ain't nervous, you ain't human. I mean, I said this to, I don't know, Jeff, if you were in the cafeteria when I spoke to Miss O'Brien's class, but I remember saying to you guys, I'm legitimately nervous speaking in front of you guys right now. And that's to 30 high school kids in a cafeteria that I remember throwing grapes at people in. It's just yeah, it is intimidating. Have I become a little bit numb to it? Sure. Do the wins and losses, 10-year-old me, cry when the Colts lost to the Patriots the first time? Probably. I'm obviously not there anymore in my life, so I think the emotions have simmered isn't the right word, have kind of quieted down a little bit. But I just think it's repetitions. I mean, you guys strike me as 3 pretty chilled individuals right now. Again, me in your shoes in high school, I would have been a little bit nervous about listening back, or what are my teachers going to think of it, things like that. So I think if you go in there and you make sure you ask an intelligent question, and questions plural, and if it's a tough question, can you back it up if that person kind of goes back and forth with you? Yeah, I mean, there are moments where press conferences end and a half hour goes by and Frank Reich texts me and is like, hey, this is what I thought of your question, or hey, I couldn't have said this then, this is what I really think, or things like that. I mean, there are those moments, and as long as you come at it from, I think, I always try to come, if I give a take, that's always the hot thing. Drew asked me earlier, where do your takes come from? Takes sound so juicy. It's I'm going to sit at the lunch table today and be like, guys, Drew Lock is going to win the MVP next year. And they're going to look at you and be like, dude, shut up. But, if you can sit there and be like, he's got Jerry Jeudy and he's got KJ Hamler, if you can back it up with, some, actual respectable info, then at least I'll walk away and be like, all right, he's just not saying that to be Stephen A. Smith or Skip Bayless. Yeah. So that's kind of my big, like, here's my 101 thinking of how I do things. I don't try to say stuff just to say it. I want to always come at it from a factual base. Sure, there's opinion that can branch off of it, but there's got to be facts behind it at some root.
Yeah, sports media now is a lot of people just saying crazy takes, trying to get clicks.
Amen. And it's a fine balance. I get it. You want clicks. That's oftentimes how you're measured. Sure, I get it. ESPN, people watch them because they're entertaining. You never know what they're going to say. But I've decided that my brand is going to be this. My brand is going to be fact-based, and hopefully enough people will respect that they'll kind of know where my lane is and know that I'm always going to be in that lane.
So to wrap this up, I got 2 questions on the sports world. Your Super Bowl prediction, and what do you think the Colts are going to do with Carson Wentz?
Oh, boy. Jeez, this is where I run. I should have said I had to leave at 3 o'clock, not 3:10. Super Bowl prediction. So I had Bills beating Rams at the start of the year. So I got half of it right. So Bengals versus Rams. Shout out to Holton Witchker, one of my best friends from Cathedral, who married a Bengals fan. So I've kind of gotten on the Who Day bandwagon there. Reese Horn spent a minute with the Bengals, by the way.
He was our last podcast.
Was he?
Yep.
God, I love Reese. Grew up with Jonathan Reese. Jonathan Reese, they're like me, Cherry Tree, Clay Junior High to Cathedral High School, and then their football careers a little bit different. Okay, I will go with, gosh, I just don't think they're going to be able to block that Rams D-line. That's what worries me, but Burrow sure has handled pressure pretty well. The Ramsey-Jamar Chase matchup, just can we get like an all-22 of that the whole game? I'd love to watch that. I will go with the Rams 31-24. The Rams are they're likable for being in LA. I mean, the Stafford story's great.
I want Stafford to win one.
McVay seems like a good dude. Hell, just keep on showing Mr. McVay. I loved him when they were showing him the other night. Aaron Donald, Cooper Kupp.
They have a lot of likable guys.
Yeah, I was texting with my brother-in-law. I was like, Stafford's wife, an incredible story, and all of that. So I will go with the Rams. Colts quarterback.
I saw your 4 options.
Yeah, 4 options. Keep Wentz, trade for QB, sign a free agent, draft. I don't think Carson Wentz will be the starter come week 1. Yeah. I know that sounds crazy. If we would have had this podcast a month ago, I know, yeah. Trust me, it sounds hot. I just get the vibe that the owner's not happy and the GM's not happy, and those are 2 really important voices in that building.
The owner's definitely not
He's
happy.
definitely not happy. He's not happy for many, many reasons. But yes, I don't think, and that's just, it's crazy to say that. I'm shocked that I'm saying that, especially because there's no realistic available options. There's not when you went from Brissett to Rivers, that made sense on paper. The Rivers to Wentz, it made sense on paper. I just don't see this on paper. Obvious choice, but I think Irsay and Chris Ballard are that upset about it, and that will overrule Frank Reich, and man, should have traded for Matthew Stafford, right?
Coulda, shoulda, woulda.
Right. Yeah. Very easy to say now, sitting here in hindsight. But also Odell Beckham, Cooper Kupp, some of those guys would also help to put around them. But
thank you, Kevin, for joining us today. It was a pleasure meeting you and learning about where you got to where you are today. You guys can check out Kevin on Kevin's Corner podcast and the morning show 107.5 and 93.5, 7 to 10 a.m. As always, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Views from the Hill Podcast and YouTube at Go Cathedral High School. I'm Seth Minter, Jeff, Drew. Thanks, Kevin.
You bet, boys. Thanks for having me.